"Officer, don't let him touch that door." The scream echoed across the entire neighborhood. Every head turned. A black and white police cruiser screeched to a stop in front of the house. The HOA president, Victoria Hayes, practically ran toward it before the tires stopped moving. She pointed at the man standing on the porch. "There! That's the trespasser. He's trying to steal Mr. Anderson's house." Within seconds, neighbors filled the sidewalks. Phones came out. Curtains opened. Children stopped riding their bikes. Everyone wanted to watch the arrest. The officer stepped out. He was young, calm, expressionless. He adjusted his body camera, then slowly walked toward the stranger. The man never moved. He simply stood there with an old military duffel bag at his feet, one hand resting on a weathered brass key. The officer stopped only inches away. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one time. Step away from the house." The stranger quietly looked at him, then nodded. "Fair enough." He stepped back, raised both hands. The crowd smiled. Victoria folded her arms. "I told you. I knew he was lying." The officer reached for the stranger's wrist. For one long second, the entire neighborhood believed they were about to witness an arrest. Then, the officer's eyes landed on something tattooed beneath the man's sleeve. His hand froze. He looked closer. His breathing changed. Slowly, he looked into the stranger's face. The stranger smiled. "You finally recognized me." The officer whispered, "No. It can't be." Victoria laughed. "What are you waiting for? Arrest him." Instead, the officer released the man's wrist, took one slow step backward, stood perfectly straight, and snapped into the sharpest military salute anyone there had ever seen. Every phone stopped recording. Every conversation ended. Victoria's smile disappeared. "What? What are you doing?" The officer never looked at her. His voice was filled with respect. "Welcome home, Colonel Masson-Reed." The entire street went silent. Victoria forced a nervous laugh. "Officer, that's impossible. He's a criminal." The officer slowly turned toward her. "No, ma'am. He's one of the most decorated Marines I've ever met. And before anyone accuses him of trespassing," he looked back at Mason. "Sir, would you do the honors?" Without saying a word, Mason reached into his duffel bag, pulled out a single brass key, walked to the front door, and unlocked it. Click. The sound echoed through the silent neighborhood. The house everyone believed belonged to someone else had just welcomed him home. Before I tell you why the HOA president was so desperate to keep this Marine away from his own house, subscribe if you enjoy stories where justice always wins. And comment below, would you trust the HOA president or the Marine? 2 weeks earlier, Colonel Mason Reed thought the hardest day of his life was behind him. He was wrong. 2 weeks earlier, Colonel Mason Reed had just completed his final deployment. 23 years in the United States Marine Corps. 3 medals for valor, and more funerals than birthdays. He wasn't coming home looking for applause. He just wanted silence. The only thing waiting for him was the house his grandfather built with his own hands nearly 60 years earlier. Every summer of Mason's childhood had been spent there. The old oak tree in the front yard, the wooden porch swing, the faded American flag his grandfather refused to replace because it had flown the day Mason enlisted. That house wasn't just property. It was family. 3 days after arriving home, Mason started repairing the fence. A little girl riding her bicycle stopped in front of the yard. "Are you the new neighbor?" Mason smiled. "No. I've lived here my whole life." The little girl frowned. "My mommy said this house belongs to the HOA now." Mason stopped hammering. "Who told her that?" "The lady with the black car." Before the little girl could answer, a black luxury SUV slowly pulled into the driveway. Victoria Hayes stepped out wearing expensive sunglasses and carrying a thick leather folder. 2 HOA board members followed behind her. She walked across the lawn as if she already owned it. "You have exactly 30 minutes to leave." Mason looked at her. "I'm sorry. This property was legally seized. You no longer have permission to remain here." Mason calmly wiped the dust from his hands. "Interesting, because I never sold it." Victoria opened her folder. "You ignored violation fines. You failed to respond." The board voted unanimously. The property now belongs to Oak Ridge Estates. The 2 board members nodded without saying a word. Mason quietly looked around the neighborhood. Dozens of curtains moved. People were watching. Nobody spoke.
Nobody questioned Victoria.
It was obvious. This wasn't the first time she'd done this. Mason reached into his toolbox. Victoria immediately took a step back. One board member whispered, "Careful." But Mason only pulled out an old photograph. It showed a teenage Mason standing beside his grandfather on the same porch. The date printed in the corner, 28 years earlier. My grandfather built this house. My father inherited it. When he passed away, it became mine. Victoria barely glanced at the photo. I don't care. The paperwork says otherwise. She snapped her fingers. One of the board members handed Mason an envelope. He opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. Every signature looked authentic. Every county stamp looked real. Anyone else would have believed it. But Mason noticed one tiny mistake. A mistake almost invisible. He smiled. Victoria crossed her arms. What's so funny? Mason carefully folded the papers, looked her straight in the eyes, and quietly said, "You should have hired a better forger." For the first time, Victoria's confident smile disappeared, because she realized he had found the one mistake that could destroy everything. Victoria's smile disappeared. You should have hired a better forger. Those 7 words hit harder than a slap. The 2 HOA board members looked at each other. What is he talking about? Victoria quickly grabbed the documents from Mason's hands. He's bluffing. He has no idea what he's talking about. Mason didn't argue. He simply pointed to the bottom corner of the first page. The county seal. Everyone leaned closer.
Victoria frowned.
It looks normal. Mason nodded. That's because you're looking at the seal. I'm looking at the date. The police officer stepped forward. What about the date? Mason pointed to a single line. This document says it was notarized on September 14th. So, Mason slowly pulled out another document from his backpack. My passport. The officer opened it. The entry stamp showed exactly where Mason had been on September 14th. Kandahar Air Base.
Afghanistan.
Mason looked directly at Victoria. So tell me, how did I sign paperwork in Colorado? While I was serving overseas? The neighborhood went completely silent. One board member quietly whispered, "Oh my God." Victoria immediately tried to interrupt. There must be some misunderstanding. But Mason wasn't finished. He reached back into his backpack again. This time, he placed a thick stack of unopened envelopes on the hood of the patrol car. Every envelope carried the same red stamp. Return to sender. The officer picked one up. Then another. All of them had been mailed to the wrong address. Mason looked at Victoria. You told everyone I ignored your notices. I never received a single one. Victoria's breathing became heavier. You can't prove I changed the address. I don't have to. Mason looked at the officer. Ask the county. The officer immediately radioed dispatch. Can you verify the mailing address on file for 214 Oak Ridge Drive? A long silence followed. Then dispatch answered. Officer. Surely this isn't necessary. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his radio one more time. Dispatch. Send the county fraud unit. I believe this neighborhood has a much bigger problem than trespassing. Across the street, one elderly homeowner quietly removed his HOA cap and threw it onto the ground. Because at that moment, everyone realized the Marine had never been the problem. The person running the neighborhood was. The neighborhood became eerily quiet. No one spoke. No one even reached for their phone. Every eye was fixed on Victoria Hayes. The confident woman who had ruled Oak Ridge Estates for nearly 8 years now looked like she could barely breathe. Officer Ryan Foster clipped his radio back onto his shoulder. County fraud unit is on the way. Victoria forced a laugh. Officer, this is ridiculous. You're destroying my reputation over a paperwork mistake. Mason Reed calmly shook his head. No. You destroyed your own reputation. 5 minutes later, 3 unmarked county vehicles rolled into the neighborhood. 2 detectives stepped out. Behind them, a county property investigator carrying a thick evidence case. Detective Sarah Collins walked straight toward Officer Foster. What do we have? He handed her every document. The forged deed, the fake violation notices, the certified mail records, the address change request. She spent several minutes reading in complete silence. Then she looked at Victoria. Did you submit these documents? Victoria swallowed hard. My attorney advised me not to answer questions. Detective Collins smiled. That's probably the smartest decision you've made today. The investigator opened his laptop, connected to the county property database. Within seconds, he froze. Detective Collins noticed. What is it? He slowly turned the screen around. There are 7. She frowned. 7 what? 7 properties. Every homeowner leaned closer. The investigator continued. Over the last 4 years, 7 homes were transferred after suspicious HOA violations. Mason looked around the neighborhood. Most of the owners were elderly, military families, or people working overseas. Exactly like him. Detective Collins slowly looked back at Victoria. This wasn't one mistake. This was a pattern. One elderly woman suddenly stepped forward. Tears filled her eyes. My husband died last year. Victoria told me I owed $40,000. I had to sell my house. Another man raised his hand. I was deployed in Germany. When I came home, my garage had already been auctioned. A third neighbor spoke. My parents lost everything. The crowd erupted. People who had stayed silent for years were finally speaking. One after another, the stories kept coming. Officer Foster looked at Mason. You weren't the first. Mason quietly replied, No. I was just the first person who came back prepared. Detective Collins nodded toward 2 deputies.
Victoria Ayes.
You are under arrest for fraud, forgery, filing false public records, and theft by deception. Victoria's legs gave out. The deputies caught her before she hit the ground. As they placed the handcuffs on her wrists, she looked at Mason. You've ruined my life. Mason stared back without anger, without revenge, without satisfaction. Then he quietly answered, No. You ruined it the moment you believed no one would fight back. The deputies escorted Victoria toward the patrol vehicle. The same neighbors who once obeyed every order now watched in complete silence. No one defended her. No one followed her. As the police cars drove away, the little girl from earlier walked over to Mason. She smiled and handed him a tiny American flag. Welcome home. For the first time since returning, Mason smiled. A week later, the court canceled every fake HOA fine. The board dissolved. The families who had been cheated began getting their homes back. And on the front porch, Mason rehung his grandfather's old American flag. Not because the house was valuable, but because some things are worth fighting for, even after the war is over.